This video will be an in-depth look at all 3 Vader Immortal episodes, including pre-production and behind the scenes on the game series. There will be complete story spoilers, and I will talk about each episode's main gameplay mechanic within the episodes section as well. The world is full of different franchises and intellectual properties, an unending amount of big ones and small ones. Some you've never even heard of, but they have a committed cult following. But few are iconic, and even fewer can be considered biblical. You'd better settle your midichlorians down and understand what a parsec is, because you don't get much bigger than Star Wars. Star Wars is credited with being one of the biggest IPs of all time, spawning films, books, TV shows, animations, board games, action figures, and much, much more. Along with this, of course, though, is video games. The Star Wars venture into video games began back in 1982 with The Empire Strikes Back on the Atari 2600. You play as Luke Skywalker fighting your way through AT-AT after AT-AT on Hoth to stop them blowing up the power generator for the Echo base. This was the first game slotted into the Star Wars video game library that currently houses over 100 Star Wars video games to the date of making this video. From tie-ins and recreations of movies, canonical games, and non-canonical games, to brand new stories exploring the Star Wars universe. And no, I'm not going to sit here and name them all. What I do have to name is LucasArts. Now, people of a certain age like me will know exactly what that is and the quality that came along with that name. For those of you that don't know, this was the video game development company that handled.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
All of the Star Wars video games, and some Indiana Jones titles as well. For a lot of people, like I said before, just to mention LucasArts normally meant that you had high expectations. Knights of the Old Republic, the Jedi Outcast series, Rogue Squadron, Pod Racer, Republic Commando, and the original Star Wars Battlefront games are just a few of the hits in the LucasArts well of games. And in 2012, when Disney purchased Lucasfilm, a year later they shut down LucasArts forever, and we all know who had exclusive control of all the Star Wars video games after that. And EA took full advantage of this, releasing plenty of new Star Wars games, and they were very hit and miss. But in 2019, something happened.
Only in the Force.
We saw the release of Jedi Fallen Order, a critically and culturally acclaimed masterpiece of a Star Wars game, cited as a return to form after loot box nonsense and buggy games since EA took over. Created by Respawn Entertainment, who have had their own dip into VR with this hot garbage, Jedi Fallen Order went for a Souls-like-ish version of a Star Wars game, with beautiful visuals, in-depth story, attention to detail, and its precise, accurate combat, and a photo mode yours truly enjoyed a lot. But this wasn't the only new kind of Star Wars game to come out in 2019, and that brings us to Vader Immortal. Oculus, after getting themselves the rights and permissions to make an official Star Wars game, teamed up with ILMX Lab, who are the Lucasfilm Industrial Light and Magic Company. ILM's X Lab is the Lucasfilm's in-house unit focused on virtual reality and augmented reality. These guys have access to everything, all the media assets used to create the films and the Lucasfilm story group, and they also have access to talk to and meet with various writers and directors working on new Star Wars films. Now, ILMX Lab would do most of the heavy lifting here, but part of that lifting would be all the money Oculus will have paid for this official game. They employed some huge names to make this game a big deal in the VR space. Ben Snow was to direct. Vader Immortal would be his directorial debut, but he is not new to cinema or games in any shape or form. He's worked on special effects for the first Iron Man film, Mars Attacks, Jurassic Park, The Mummy, Star Wars Attack of the Clones, Avengers Age of Ultron, and so much more. As for writers, this is where it gets really fun. Among Mohen Leo, who we'll get back to in a minute, there was Colin Mackey and the big gun of David S. Goyer as the lead writer. He's in the big leagues of cinema and video game writers, having written as co- or lead writer on films such as the entire Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, Blade 1, Blade 2, Call of Duty Black Ops 1, 2, and Cold War, Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, the Constantine TV series, which go watch that by the way, it's amazing.
Stay away.
It's easier to deny danger than to face it, but make no mistake, if you don't listen to me, you'll be dead by morning.
I'm calling the police.
If you're so committed to contacting the authorities, then here's where they can reach me. Or you can, if you enjoy breathing.
And so much more. According to Goyer himself, he was approached with quite a sparse pitch for the game. They contacted me and said, "We're thinking about doing something in the VR space, possibly with Vader." After that, he was off to the Skywalker Ranch archives to see what he could find. When he was there, he saw some unreleased artwork that included Vader's castle. These images are by Ralph McQuarrie for Vader's castle back in 1978 during the early drafts of The Empire Strikes Back. This is where the inception for the main setting began. It was mentioned at the time to Goyer they had a place like that in the upcoming film Rogue One, and they let him see some footage of that. This is what brings us back around to Mohen Leo, one of the writers for Vader Immortal. He was the visual effects supervisor for Rogue One, and what makes Rogue One so relevant to Vader Immortal, of course, is that in its last scenes, it recreated the iconic first appearance of Vader and brought it into the modern day, and it was glorious. Mohen said in an interview, "I was actually on the set when we shot the final scenes of Rogue One. The origin of Vader Immortal happened while we were also working on Rogue One. While I was on set and seeing the sets of Vader's castle, people in San Francisco started talking about Vader Immortal, started saying, oh, we should do a VR experience. A lot of what Vader Immortal became was inspired by those first glimpses of Vader's castle. I think certainly one thing that Rogue One did with that final scene is the expectation to see Vader being awesome. So we have to deliver on that as well." So with all that said, ILMX Lab had the budget, the idea, the resources, the licensing, and the talent, but could they make this the smash hit it looks like it was going to be? Well, it sure was looking that way, especially since 3 years before Vader Immortal in 2016, ILMX Lab released Trials on Tatooine for the HTC Vive. Those of you out there that are very early adopters of VR might even remember this one. It's a really short little VR experience with all the tropes: Millennium Falcon, Stormtroopers, lightsaber blaster deflecting, and being handed a lightsaber by R2-D2. It's short, really short, but is the perfect sneak peek into what Vader Immortal would become. Also, it's free to play on Steam right now in 2022 as of recording this video. It says it only supports the Vive and the Index, but I managed to get it working on my Oculus Quest 2 through Steam via cable link. Well, on May 19th, 2019, the world said hello to Vader Immortal Episode 1 on the Oculus Quest and Oculus Rift for PC. Oh, that's right, it's episodic, and Episode 1 released to mixed but mostly positive reviews from critics and consumers. As usual, you can't really trust the critics, especially on the day of release, from payoffs to conforming to positive reviews so they can keep getting their new games to try, get those views for those new reviews, and sell out and just say everything's fantastic. And unsurprisingly, some reviewers at the time of release of Vader Immortal Episode 1 didn't even really know what they were talking about. I found a very interesting quote in an article about this game at the time of release that was just... It said, and I quote, "Do you know how disappointed I was that I found out that lightsabers are activated by a button? It just seems so mundane." End quote. This is utter madness because lightsabers are activated by a button. It is literally the in-universe way that they work, and it also led to people who aren't Jedi using lightsabers to help save themselves. I will say though, to the author's credit, they also said, quote, "I wrote Star Wars fan fiction where they activated them with the Force," end quote. Which is cool and whatnot, but it's not accurate. The most important opinion here, just like with other games, is how did the people it was made for like the game? If you go to the Oculus store, you'll find 177 pages worth of reviews on Vader Immortal Episode 1, 70% are 5 stars, 20% are 4 stars, and that leaves you with 10% of reviews that are not great. And they mostly come down to one thing: it was too short. All those positive reviews are citing the chance to enter Vader's home and see the big man himself in full immersive VR. Voiced by Scott Lawrence, who has voiced Vader in a number of mediums, and quite frankly, to these ears, he sounds more Vader than James Earl Jones did in the original films.
The Force is more powerful than you can possibly imagine. It reveals mysteries that make the weak turn away in fear.
But how could you not love this man?
Meow 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 meow.
The other points for initial reviews speak of how original the VR experience was, and when it comes to VR at the time, it definitely was. The possibility of what's to come was always on the lips of people who played Episode 1. It gave you everything that you could want. You come into the experience as a smuggler on your ship full of spice alongside your trusted droid, Zedo, E3, or Zoe for short. Zoe is voiced expertly by Saturday Night Live's Maya Rudolph.
Ugh, everything's hurry with this guy. Won't even slow down to hunt for loot. I've seen a ton, which I'd like to bring with me.
And she is more important than you think in these episodes, which I'll explain in a moment. After coming across an Empire vessel, things take a turn for the worse for you and Zoe, as things often do for anyone who comes across the Empire. They board your ship and you end up at Vader's castle.
I got a bad feeling about this, Captain.
After the obvious cliche of basically, you are the one, you try to make your escape with Zoe, and cliche or not, it sucks you right in. Staring Vader in the face, you feel why he's the Force that he is. Big, intimidating, and a presence to be sure, and it pulls you into this universe. But if we're gonna talk about presence that keeps you in this universe, it's Zoe, 100%. Yes, she's the companion that gives you hints and keeps things moving along, but she feels like a real part of this universe and always keeps you grounded within it, and treating you like the real person you are in this virtual world. Just as well, because you don't get to talk. What makes me say that is there's a moment in episode 1 with Zoe, it's quick, but breathed complete validity to my presence within this world, and it's this moment when you're climbing up the outside of Vader's castle.
Now grab my hand!
Okay, well, you could have helped me out before. And I'm pretty sure I'm not going to grab your hand, but the ledge. Oh! Whoa. Oh. See, now that I like. That is a great little interaction. But an NPC physically helping you in a VR game, that is rare, if not completely absent from most VR games. I was completely taken by surprise when Zoe said, "Take my hand," and I could. Now, while episode 1 has its cliches, and frankly all 3 episodes are full of fan service cliches, including the one you know was coming.
Okay, I think I can activate them, but I'm gonna need a minute. Will you cover me?
Oh, I'm drooling. I am drooling. Ah! Whatever your thoughts going into episode 1, or whether you should even buy episode 1 and start to travel down this series of episodes, all of your hesitation completely goes away here, as it feels just as good as you want it to. This spans over all 3 of the episodes, especially the lightsaber combat. It is top-notch and absolutely thrilling. The tutorial implemented in episode 1 is pretty seamless. Once you pick up the saber for the first time, a training robot will appear and challenge you to combat. If you don't fare too well, then a more in-depth tutorial will begin.
As
access means that training is required.
Training?
Specializing training.
I thought I was on the Obi-Wan Kenobi level here.
Lock and attack.
If you seem relatively competent, then it is just on until you defeat the robot. No matter what review I've ever read, you would be hard-pressed to find someone say the lightsaber combat here isn't great. It's fluid, it's simple, and locking sabers with an enemy is something you really feel. Not to mention deflecting blaster beams back at people, the saber combat brings a sense of realism and gravity to this VR experience. But it isn't as easy as you think. There's definitely some forgiving frames in here when it comes to deflecting blasters, but it takes practice. We've seen the Jedi deflecting blaster fire just as a standard Star Wars ability since the first films began. But when you have to do it yourself and you aren't a trained Jedi, it's a completely different ballgame. But when you nail it, oh, it's so satisfying. And after some practice, oh, it is just so great. You feel so powerful. Saber combat is the highlight for the entirety of Darth Vader. Do you know who that is? Saber combat is easily the highlight of the entire Vader Immortal series. Most of the rest isn't really anything to write home about. There's lots of unscrew this and twist that to unlock this door. By the way, in which this base has a different internal working for every door you unlock, just to keep the minor puzzles fresh. It does, but it's still the same thing over and over. Vader Immortal Episode 1 ends on a high and leaves you wanting more, and I certainly was ready, raring, and fired up for Vader Immortal Episode 2. And that's exactly what I did straight away after spending some time in the Episode 1 dojo. And that's something that will get its own section later on in the video, because it's not only fun, but it decides whether these episodes have longevity or not, and it all depends on your taste. Episode 2 continues with the big bad man himself, Darth Vader, showing you and helping you realize your inner Force powers. It's the cliche of every Star Wars game. When you learn to use your powers, you use them to solve this puzzle, solve that puzzle, defend yourself by pushing and pulling things out of the way to get a feel for it. And it feels fine.
Defend yourself.
Wait, what? The fuck? Get out of here! But Episode 2 does not play around. There is a lot more story to uncover here, a lot more combat fun to be had, including using the Force to defeat your enemies. Now in this episode, you'll travel deep under Vader's castle to discover the truth about what happened to this planet that his castle is on, and what Vader is even doing here. From teaming up with the race of the planet's original inhabitants, to teaming up with Darth Vader himself, teaching you the ways of the Force. Whoa.
Unlock the secrets of life and death.
Oh my god! I never really realized how powerful Vader is, but that... It certainly does pick up later on in a certain set piece that was obvious to me the moment I entered the room, as it would be to almost any gamer. They're gonna come to life, whatever those are. 100% actually, that these things will come to life.
A few moments later.
Oh, an ancestor.
No! Yeah! But it doesn't make it any less amazing and exhilarating.
Use the Force to place the stone.
This is wicked! This is pretty awesome. It's pretty great. Come on! Yeah! Oh man, I wish I could do that in real life. That is absolutely sick. More Sentinels, I demand it. Lifting these Guardians or Sentinels, whatever you want to call them, up off the ground, slamming them into each other, off of the walls, into the floor, into the ceiling, is an absolute power fantasy moment. As I was playing it, I was just begging for more of this moment because I just couldn't get enough of it. Unfortunately, that is a running theme through the Vader Immortal series, in the fact that these awesome moments, they just don't last long, and neither does this series. I read that episode 2 really slows down from episode 1, but I really didn't feel that when I played it. In fact, one of the best parts of episode 1 was picking up the lightsaber for the first time, and episode 2 just follows along with that trope, where you pick up something else that's extra special. Ooh, that is... No one told me this was in the game. Oh my goodness. A unique saber I was not aware was in this game, created by the Jedi long ago. Let's just say it's along the lines of the black saber the Mandalorians have, and oh my, is it pretty. You'll also get into a fight with an underground Rancor type monster, but unfortunately I didn't get to fight it in the way the game intended, because there was a moment earlier in episode 2 where you use your unique saber to unlock something, and the saber went away. It glitched out and disappeared. I unlocked the thing and it was gone. So when I came to fight this massive underground Rancor type creature with 4 arms, I had no saber at all and had no way to defend myself except for throwing rocks at it with the Force, which did not do the trick. This was a bug, and I know that now, but I didn't know it at the time. I didn't think I was supposed to have a saber on me, so I was so confused about what I was supposed to be doing. I only realized when I got to the end of episode 2, somebody mentioned the unique saber, and I said to myself, well, yeah, that's great, but I don't have it, and all of a sudden, boom, it was back on my waist.
You have
The Sentinels. There you go. See, I need that feckin' sword. Is that me? Am I? Oh, I have it now, do I? I have not had that sword this whole time. What the fuck? So I basically went through half of episode 2 without my unique saber when I should have had it. And as this game's been out for 3 years and there's no patches coming out anytime soon, that's kind of bothersome. If you're playing this for the first time like I was, you don't know that you're supposed to have that saber after you use it to unlock this certain item. And it's during episode 2 that you really start to see this game's age. If Vader Immortal has a fatal flaw or something that makes it show its age quite heavily, it's only one simple thing, and that's the fact that whenever you do anything to do with action or interaction, you cannot move. There is free movement as you go around these levels, but when things need to be done, there is no movement and you are locked in place. You stand in your designated spot and have everything happen around you. It mostly seems that things are just happening around you, but you happen to be there at the same time and always stood in the exact right spot. And this is why I mentioned before that Zoe is such a positive attribute of the world, as she moves around with you when you are free moving, and she talks to you as you move. Everybody else will not stand and have a proper conversation with you unless you are stood and locked into your designated trigger spot for the dialogue and action to happen. And this attribute of being locked in place for everything in the game is probably why it's more of a VR experience than a game. I don't see this cited much in reviews for the game when it released, but I think that's because we were in an even earlier stage of VR back in 2019 than we are today. And today, it's still pretty early stages. But 3 years later, and many VR games later from AAA studios and indie developers, we like that freedom of movement, and we have that freedom of movement, especially in melee games. Look at Blade and Sorcery, look at Battle Talent, and to be honest, I could name probably about 20 more melee games where we have freedom of movement. Everslot. So this being the first time I played through the series in 2022, being static for all of this action is frustrating. It does make things easier in the real world. You can position yourself in your play space with plenty of room for melee combat, and you're not really going to feel like you have to move everywhere, because when combat happens, you lock yourself down. And that's great if you're in a small play space, especially like I have to play in. You can see this implementation was probably considering how unpopular VR was at the time, but also that people didn't really have space to have full-on sword and lightsaber combat. But nevertheless, it does not become any less frustrating. You block or take hits, there is no dodging. Which is such a shame, because this is 3 years ago and they had such an amazing lightsaber combat system. If they could just update it to what today has with freedom of movement, it would be perfect. Episode 3 is obviously the last in the trilogy for Vader Immortal episodes, and they definitely treated it as a finale. Unfortunately, for the most part, it's just more of the same. You've got your lightsaber combat, you've got your force abilities, but it's still a case of just stand where you're supposed to stand and then have the things happen around you or do the fight that you're supposed to have. And I have to say, by this point, I was getting a little frustrated with that, as I was just yearning for the freedom of movement while I enjoyed this amazing lightsaber combat. There was a brief moment where I thought things were about to get crazy, and that is when you gain control of an entire Sentinel army.
Now, a tribute to the three favors.
Ooh, this is nice. You have a practice with them, you use them to take out some stormtroopers, there's a whole tutorial on signs to cast with your saber to control this Sentinel army. And then you are let free to start a war with this army, but that isn't actually what happens. You control them, you fight some stormtroopers, you learn the tutorial of how to signal them to do things, but after about 2 minutes of gaining control of this army, you then relinquish control to somebody else, which certainly begs the question to why you just spend 5 to 10 minutes learning how to control this army very specifically with your saber, just to give away that privilege to someone else, and no, you don't ever get to control them again throughout the whole thing. The main objective of episode 3 is to stop Darth Vader doing that evil juju that he does so well. You make your way through the hangar while looking down below at the war between the Sentinels and the Stormtroopers, and I grant you, that is definitely a sight to behold, as this is one of the things almost every Star Wars piece of media is known for, and it's that huge, large-scale battle of good and evil, which certainly becomes a bit more of a shame, because if you ever wanted to experience that Star Wars trope that they often throw at you in video games to be part of this large-scale battle against the Empire, you don't get to do that. You fight a few stormtroopers along the way, but of course it's more of the same, just deflecting blaster fire. But you do get your hands on a turret in this section, which I found very exciting. Oh, yes. Suck it! The action stays really high in episode 3 for the most part. Going through the hangar, this is where you're fighting plenty of stormtroopers and making your way up to the roof for the finale where you fight Vader himself. It's the novelty of Vader that keeps these episodes ticking along and kept me playing them and coming back to them to finish them. Unfortunately, the fight between Vader isn't different from anyone else's. You block, you strike, and that's it. No dodging, you're locked in place. You only move if you get thrown somewhere by Vader. And even then, it's to a pre-designated location for things to happen around you. Unfortunately, episode 3 just suffers from the same problems as the other episodes. It's just after playing through 3 of them, it becomes more apparent what the issues here are. The visuals in episode 3 don't let it down all the way through. One of the most consistent things in all of these episodes is that the visuals on PC are fantastic, even for a game of this age. On the Quest, however, the game doesn't look as good, but that's completely par for the course and expected. At the end of the day, on Quest, it is still not a bad looking game, and there's still some good dynamic lighting. To recommend any version visually, it would have to be the PC, of course. It runs really smooth as well. Even on my very weak laptop with a GTX 1060, I was getting smooth frame rate all of the time, even with the big action scenes on screen. Episode 3 also reveals how chill Zoe is about murdering people. It's gonna be bad. Oh! Force him! Force throw! Force throw! Force throw! Oh, she's pulling a friggin' Batman on him! Yeet!
Later, Metal Mouth. That's that. Let's go.
She is.
You lead the way, and be ready for trouble.
Yeah, nah, man, that's cool. You're very nonchalant about that murder you just committed. And when you take a look at reviews from consumers from the day episode 1 was released up until now, Everybody says the same thing about the experience, and that it is too short. They'll give it 4 stars, maybe even 5 stars, but the same complaint is heard over and over again, that these episodes are just too short. Now that depends on how quickly you're gonna get through them, but on average these episodes maybe last about 45 minutes maximum each, and kind of get shorter as the episodes go on. So you're looking at like 2, maybe 2.5 hour games here in total with all 3 episodes put together. Narratively, there's nothing to complain about. There's plenty of story, plenty of lore, and if you're interested in that side of the Star Wars universe, you're going to get exactly what it is that you enjoy from Vader Immortal. Combat is brief and normally saved for large set pieces, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but unfortunately being stuck in place while you experience them does take some of the fun out of what could have been an even more exciting experience. You certainly cannot fault the effort that has gone into these 3 episodes though. Everybody is motion captured perfectly, the voice acting is fantastic, the writing's great, and this world feels alive. This is top budget AAA VR in so many ways, and it shows from the first moment you fire up episode 1. So I purchased the game on PC for £7.99 for all 3 episodes as a bundle, because they were on offer. Normally you will have to pay separately to buy all 3 episodes, and is it worth it for a 2.5 hour campaign? That's up to you. One thing that you do get alongside Vader Immortal though, like I mentioned before, and we're coming back around full circle baby, it's the Vader Immortal Dojos. Now for every episode there's this wave-based extra added on, and to be honest, it's a lot of fun. From fighting training droids to bugs and having to prove your worth as a lightsaber master, and it adds a lot of replayability to test your skills, and not only that, there are unlockables as you go along. The bonuses are things like different coloured lightsabers. The unlockables don't stop there though. Basically any Jedi you've ever seen you can unlock their saber, and that includes dual wielding sabers. So you can have Ventress's sabers, you can have Ahsoka Tano's lightsabers. And it doesn't even stop with lightsabers, you can get new force abilities like Palpatine's lightning. And this is definitely a challenge. These waves aren't exactly easy, and if you put it on the hardest difficulty, you need to act like you are a fully trained Jedi Master. I lost more time in these dojos than I did to the entire campaign put together, and I did it without even realizing, because there is something about this wave-based extra that can bring out this competitive side in you, and for me, I just kept wanting to get the perfect score on each level so I can unlock the various extras and then use them in the next level. I wanted my red saber and I wanted my Mace Windu saber so bad, and I got them. And the dojos are different in every episode. So in episode 1, you have certain levels in this dojo, and then episode 2 has different ones, and episode 3. So they all are different in regard to their respective episode of Vader Immortal. Which is a nice extra, because I have to say, if this was just 2.5 hours smushed together over 3 episodes, I would tell you not to buy this. Unless it was on sale for like $2. Now, I'm fully aware I spent a lot of this review saying how this game doesn't live up to modern standards, how it's got bugs, how everything just happens around you while you stand on the spot, and all the other problems I found with these episodes. But I would still recommend it to absolutely anyone that likes Star Wars, even someone that doesn't, even someone who doesn't have that much experience with Star Wars or the franchise. This is a great introduction, it's a great campaign, the lore is fantastic, the lightsaber combat is beyond compare, and in general it's just a really good VR experience. You can feel the passion in this game as well. Everything is completely accurate, all the sounds, all the visuals, and the score, which I haven't really mentioned in the review purely for the fact that the mouse would copyright strike me faster than anything in the world if I let any more than about 2 seconds worth of their soundtrack slip through on this video. The audio is great and exactly what you would expect. There's my review of the audio. It sounds very John Williams-like. It's amazing. Love it. Perfectly what you would expect for Star Wars. The longevity of these episodes come from the dojos, and I have to say that will extend these episodes by hours and hours and hours. You can challenge yourself with different difficulties, and the levels get harder as you go, and they're not messing around. You know, there's 20-30 levels in each dojo. You're unlocking rewards at the same time, which makes you want to go back and do other levels again with dual wielding. You even get hold of blasters and thermal detonators at one point. The campaign wasn't designed to be long, but the dojos were definitely thrown in to keep you occupied, and they do exactly that. And I have to put this disclaimer in, like I do with every other VR Melee heavy game that I've reviewed before this. Your realism within the combat comes down to you yourself and what you want to experience. If you want to do this properly, go for it. I sure did. I was posing and holding my stance like Obi-Wan Kenobi a lot of the time during these playthroughs because I wanted that immersion. But also, if I just stuck my hand out in front of myself and wiggled the lightsaber around wildly, I would beat everyone every time really, really fast. And that's exactly the same with any VR Melee game. I understand that that's how it works, but I like to say this every time anyway. If you want the immersion and you want that lightsaber combat, you need to put the effort into making that happen. Vader Immortal shows its age in some ways, but still now, even 3 years later, it is by no means a bad VR game. If you want freedom of movement to run around while you use a lightsaber and the Force to be as good or as evil as you like, then I would recommend buying Blade and Sorcery and using mods to achieve that, because there's certainly no restriction on movement there or dismemberment, because you won't be seeing any of that in Vader Immortal either. You can slice a stormtrooper as much as you want, but he'll stay together. But if you can find these 3 episodes for Vader Immortal on sale in a humble bundle, or maybe even a Steam summer or winter sale, it's a VR experience no Star Wars lover should miss.
Punch it, Captain.
Punch it, Zoe.
We've got a treasure to find.